And nowadays they really are more the business first side, but there are some family first that still exist. Let me give you one very, very clear example of a family first business. You might not think of it as a business, but the royal family. In the UK, the royal family is a completely family first business. They are a business. That's how they've survived so far. But you basically can't have certain positions unless you were born into the family. Until recently, there's been a lot of like marriages within the family just to keep the business family oriented. So that's an extreme example of a family first. And then a family business first is someone who maybe started their company as a family business, but doesn't necessarily have to pass it on to a family member because they care more about the success of the business and who is maybe most eligible and most well fit for a transition of ownership rather than just picking someone because they're a family. And out of my interviewees, I had one interviewee that I talked to that would probably fall into the family first category, maybe two, and then the rest that I talked to were more focused on the business first, management first area. Okay, so this is one of the main things that we talk about also in education of family business is this like 3-circle model. It's really important for family businesses to kind of like fill out or at least look at something like this to give themselves an idea of where people lie and how to kind of like categorize people who are in the family. So this is a really common model. So if you just search it on Google, there's all kinds of articles that pop up about it in different types of graphics. But I think this one's a really good one just because it shows so clearly the overlap. And with big businesses, you can put people in every single one of these sections. Smaller businesses, you might only have like the family owner employees and then family employees. That's common. One of the people I interviewed was in that section. And then one of the people I interviewed filled all the boxes. So this is just kind of something that gives you a guide when you're talking about how to break down employees in a family business. I'll take a second to have anyone ask questions. I'm kind of just talking quickly. So if anyone has anything, feel free to speak up, as stands for the whole presentation. Okay, so like I mentioned, I interviewed 6 different people who are either the owners of or will become owners of a family business. So that means like succession wise. And this is kind of what I combined as my feedback. So the first one was complications. So a lot of people mentioned different like family disputes, having a stake in their business and the success of it, having issues maybe with how to handle employees who maybe aren't performing, but they are family. So how do you deal with that? And then succession planning was a huge one, which I know I've mentioned already a couple of times, and how there's complications with that. So of the 6 people that I interviewed, every single one of them said that succession planning is something that's in their brain, but none of them have made a plan for it. And I was like, that's a little scary. We should work on that. And so that is definitely a complication that I've seen across the board, that's something that they know is important, but they maybe haven't taken the time to think about it, or they think they're too young for that to be something that's important. But you really have to think about how will your business be successful and know that that's part of it. And then some extra responsibility that comes with family businesses. One of my interviewees mentioned that there was like an accident involving one of the company vehicles, and because it was his son that had basically caused the accident, then he was more responsible for it than his like non-family partner. And so then instead of them splitting it 50-50 like they had been previous company situations, he ended up actually having to pay for the entirety of it just because it was his son. So maybe there's just like some extra responsibility that comes with that. And then another kind of wing of extra responsibility is when you are maybe passing it on to like the 2nd or 3rd generation, that generation feels kind of the pressure of needing to continue this business. So there's just like all these external factors when it comes to family businesses that create some extra responsibility on their backs. Generations, the difference in generations and how they act in terms of the business. I alluded to this earlier, but the transition between the second to third generation is a much harder transition, just because that generation was not part of the business at its roots, but it instead was born into it. And so that kind of changes, like, maybe some work ethic side, some basically, are you entitled to this business, that type of thing. And then pride is another big thing. So all interviewees mentioned the pride that they have in their company, and how their family has been a part of it. So they're just saying, like, I am really proud of, like, how my parents got the company to this point, and I know I can lean on them for asking different questions about how I should handle it or how I should pass it on. Every single one of them mentioned some sort of pride in having their family members work alongside them or be above them or below them or all of that sort. So that was definitely a consistency. Another big consistency was passion. All the interviewees mentioned that the key success to a successful business, especially when entering a family one, is, do you have the passion for the company? I'll hit on this again a little bit later in terms of my experiences, but entering the business just for family business sake is great, because you feel like you have some sort of responsibility towards your family and towards that business. But if you really don't have a passion for what the company does or how it runs or the people who work there, there are going to be some lapses in how you do your work in comparison to someone who does really love that business and love the industry. So that was definitely consistent, is you have to have the passion. Employees, there's a huge difference in how each of my interviewees talked about the treatment of non-family member employees versus family member employees. This one, it was so crazy, because one of my interview questions was, do you think that you treat non-family member employees differently than you treat family member employees? I had two people that said absolutely, and I was like, oh, okay, like, absolutely, how? And one of them said, I treat my own family members much harsher, much stricter. I expect way more out of them than my non-family member employees, because, like, they have the passion, they have the stake in the game situation. And then the other person who said absolutely said completely opposite. They said, I let my sons have much more flexibility. If they underperform, I'm not going to fire them, XYZ. So that was kind of a crazy difference there. And then another difference was, one of mine immediately, she said, I try to treat them no different. It's very important to me for every employee to have equal stake in the game, whether they're a family member or not. You can guess that would probably be a business first, not a family first business. And so that was something that was really cool to see too, is she was talking about how she really makes it a point to show up for all of her employees and be there and support them no matter whether they're family members or not. And then the final thing that I kind of gathered from this feedback was the separation. So there is a need for separation of family and business when it comes down to what's best for the business. One of my interviewees made a really good comment about it's so great working alongside family members, because you feel like you can be more open with them. There's better communication. And then he was like, except for when it gets really hard and you want to, like, stay their family, but you know what's best for the business, especially when it's a really big decision that could be like a downfall of a business. And he was like, it really comes down to what's best for the business. And kind of like really trying to separate it and level head with the person that you're talking with, the family member, and just say, like, we need to get down, like, look only at the numbers or look only at the applicants or something like that, and say, like, what is best for this business, not what is best for you and I. So that was another really good takeaway. So these are my general interview feedbacks. Of course, the interviews were long and were with six different people, so there were all kinds of miscellaneous comments too, but this is kind of like the overall what I took from it. Okay, so my experience with family business is kind of foundational on my dad's company, but I've been surrounded by family business my whole life. So by foundational on my dad's company, he is one of those people who, like, isn't necessarily by definition a family business, but because he's the only owner, he has only ever been the owner. However, his dad worked for him. All of me and both my sisters worked for him. My mom has worked for him, uncles, cousins, and there are non-family member employees, more of those than family members. But I would definitely consider that a family business because we have all kinds of external factors like family businesses have, that are part of the business as well. And we can fill out almost fully that 3-circle model that we talked about earlier. So just some quick things. Also being surrounded by family business my whole life. 3 of the people I interviewed are very close, like family friends or cousins or something of the sort, to me, that I was able to interview because I know their business really well. So they kind of got a little more in depth with me just because I didn't have to ask the surface level questions about their business. So it's just kind of all around me, and you really don't realize it until you do something like this. And I was like, oh, I could interview this person, this person, this person. And I don't know if it's just special to my network or maybe like Omaha in general or Nebraska. But it was just a really cool thing to experience. One thing, if you want to think about complications, my dad told me a story of when his dad worked for him, so my grandpa. And there was a time when my grandpa had started drinking pretty heavily, and it was starting to come into work. And my dad owns a construction company, and so my grandpa would be operating big machinery, or using hand saws or hammers or all kinds of things, electric staplers, all that stuff, nail guns. And my dad had been told by several people, I think Ron is drinking on the job, or he was drinking before, and so he's not totally with it, and we just are worried about the safety. And of course, you're worried about the safety of that no matter who it is. And then but the fact that it was my dad's dad, he was like, well, how am I going to approach this? Like, first of all, it's a family member, and second of all, it's the son approaching dad, which is a very interesting dynamic as well. So basically, my dad just sat him down and was like, I'd have this conversation with anyone, any of my employees, but I just, like, we know you've been drinking or when you're coming to work, and if that's not fixed right away, I'm gonna have to fire you, or I'm gonna have to give you a different position that's not paid through the company. You're just gonna have to be like my right hand man type of guy. Like, that can absolutely not be a liability. And he took it really well and like got himself cleaned up and stuff. So, but my dad said he thought, like, he had many sleepless nights. Like, how am I going to talk to him about this? How am I going to talk about this? What if I never talk to my dad again after this situation? So that was one of like the conflict situations that was really interesting to hear about. But my dad was one of those people who really mentioned pride. He was like, I love having my girls work here. I love having my wife help out. I love having his uncle works with him all the time still. He's like in a kind of retirement position. So that was something that was really cool to hear from too. So growing up in a family business, I have seen the good, the bad, the ugly. And it's been really, really interesting. It just brings like such a great dynamic. But as my dad said, as almost every single other of my interviewees did, that I asked them to rate on a scale of 1 to 10. If they really enjoy being part of a family business, being like 10, absolutely wouldn't do anything different. 1 being, oh gosh, I wish I would have done anything else. And 5 out of 6 of them said 10 out of 10. They said, absolutely couldn't imagine doing anything else. Love my experience, love working with my family. Yes, there are issues, but we work through them. It makes us stronger. So that was something that was really cool. It was like definitely people who love what they do. Okay, and then I think hopefully I left enough time. If there's any questions or comments, it can be questions about my experience or the people who I interviewed. I'm gonna keep them anonymous besides my dad. I'm gonna keep the rest of them anonymous, but I can talk about the content or anything that I've researched, any of my progress in that way. So that's kind of the end of my thing. If anyone has any questions.
What I want to know is how does it affect what you're doing today?
That's a good question. Oh, yeah, and that was one of the things I want to talk about too, but I really didn't want to go over time because I wanted to make sure we had time for questions. But so one of the things about passion, I love my dad. I love my dad's business. I've loved working there, here and there for a long time. I do not want to take it over. He's offered it to me. I've decided no. It's construction, which I think is a great field and it's awesome for him, and I've loved growing up in it. It's not awesome for me. I don't understand it as much as he does. He's done like the nitty gritty, like on the job, hammer to the nail. situations. I haven't. I basically have only worked in the office. I've just kind of benefited from him being able to do that kind of work. Obviously now he's always in the office, but he kind of started from those like learn it from the ground up. I didn't, and I don't care to. And so I think that's a big part of the passion part of it. And him and I have talked about it over and over again. And we decided it's a really good thing for me, because if I don't absolutely love the trade like he does, I won't be as successful. So that's kind of like a past one. So in the future, I'm not taking over his business. At least I'm not planning on it unless something crazy happens. But I feel like my education and my experiences in it will help me if I do go into a family business to work for, not being part of the family, but being a non-family employee in a family business, just because, like we said, like 90% of businesses, even though some are, like huge ones like Walmart, you would never really know, or it wouldn't affect their family business. But so that would be something that's really interesting to me. Like if I come into a smaller business that's in Omaha, that's family business, I would kind of know, like have that background about it. And it's just interesting nonetheless, like
Yeah,
even if I do nothing with it.
thanks.
Yeah.
Figure, I feel like was one of those figures that surprised me, but a family business, like a lot of businesses, but like most of small businesses, right, start out with some type of family member.
Right. Yeah, that figure surprised me
When
too.
you first brought up this topic, a much more niche actually applies to well, according to your statistics, the vast majority of small businesses.
Yeah, when I
And
did bring it
I
up,
like
I was
your.
like, I don't
Sorry, go
know.
ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say,
What'd you
yeah, when I
say?
brought up the topic of when I wanted to do like the webinar surrounding this or the workshop surrounding this, I was like, I don't think I should do it. Like, it's pretty niche. I don't know if it's really like
Yeah.
valuable. But then as I'm doing all the research, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's like all these companies. So it's definitely valuable. As I mean, it is specific, like specific situation, but it definitely is valuable. Yeah.
Well, and I loved your approach to it. It was creative. It was, based views and research, and it almost seems like something that even want to kind of double down and keep growing a body of research around this, because it's so applicable to small
Yeah.
business. The family dynamics and how to manage that, how to, what are the kind of strengths outside of it